And as you develop that eye for detail of locomotives, believe me, that's a fantastic skill to have. If you either want to work at a railroad, a lot of people I come across say, oh, I'd love to work at CSX, or they even at times would say, oh, I'd love to work either at General Electric where they build the engines, or just anywhere around trains. I mean, one of my lifelong wishes was that I would get to work around trains. And the truth of the matter is, one of the best places to start is to just hone your eye for detail of trains. It's not a bad thing to just learn as much as you can. And at times, the thing about it is, it doesn't sometimes feel like you're learning when it's so much fun. Because if it's so much fun to know that this locomotive that I'm drawing here is, for instance, going to be pulling a coal train through Charleston, West Virginia, through Huntington, and you know that the Huntington, West Virginia shop is just this key place on the CSX system. And when I say Huntington, West Virginia, you know exactly where I'm talking about. Or if I talk about that the same engine could be on the B&O line and that it could be in Cumberland, Maryland, and you go, I know where Cumberland, Maryland is. Boy, I know exactly where that is. That's this very important shop on B&O, and it's part of CSX. It's like, well, don't you realize that you've learned that? And that's knowledge? And the thing about it is that the more knowledge you have, and I mean, that's just CSX knowledge, but it also applies to General Electric. It applies to, believe me, it applies to the railroad industry in general. It applies to the U.S. Department of Transportation. It applies to lots of things. So when you realize that you have that much knowledge, and you mainly just think of knowledge as just these finer skills, and you don't think that when I say Huntington, West Virginia on CSX, it's like, wow, believe me, this huge pool of knowledge is so important. And the more you draw or study trains, the more important everything you learn will be. And as I put the steps on this engine, as this train hauls freight, CSX also helps so many of both your classmates and other kids and so many others get the chance to learn through programs such as Beyond Our Rails and working through programs such as City Year. It helps make schools nicer. It might have helped make your school nicer. And in a lot of cities, they help by the freight they haul. They paint schools, they make schools nicer, they plant trees, and they get mentors to students so that students can get their math skills better. And a lot of students, by getting their math skills better, they learn. If they like trains, they can learn more about trains. They can draw trains if they want to. You know, getting your math skills better is one of the key things in life, and learning to read a lot more, and it opens you up so that you can learn about the towns that CSX serves and learn about just about everything. So as this train pulls all the freight we need, it not only does that, but it builds a better community that it serves. So as it supports the places it serves, I'm moving on to put the trucks underneath the train, which of all things, the trucks are what supports the train. So and the trucks are actually a very difficult part. I've mentioned that before. So if the trucks take a while and a lot of practice, things that are difficult tend to take a lot of practice. So if I draw these very quickly, I'm drawing these very quickly, but don't you feel like you have to draw the trucks as quickly as I am, because I'm doing you a disservice by drawing these trucks so quickly. As you see that side frame that I just put there, I was able to do that quickly because I've drawn it so many times. And you'll be able to draw it so many times yourself by practice. And practice really makes us able to do it. And there's kind of two things about practice. One is that if you really enjoy the drawing and if you really like trains, you'll want to practice. And trust me, if you don't want to draw the train, then if you like to play the piano or if you just like to, as I said, watch the trains go by, practice doing something like that. But and as I'm putting the roller bearings underneath these trucks, as you do your drawing, a lot of people will end up saying, don't use circles, or doesn't count if you use a circle in your drawing. But as I've said before in other videos, if you're able to measure something and know exactly where to put a circle, that's 90% of the battle, is learning how to measure something and know where to put the circle. And here go the springs. And those springs basically hold up the train. Well, they don't hold up the train, but they cushion the ride. And this 9/16 circle basically, and here I'm putting the bevel on the wheel. And basically the bevel, this little tiny detail that I'm putting on, this little bevel is actually, which is so funny, this little bevel, this little inner part of the circle, is from dating back to over 150 years ago, or I guess that's 200, over 200 years ago. The history of the B&O Railroad is the bevel on the wheel is what makes a train work. And basically, because the train, when it goes around a bend, if you've rail fanned a lot in the mountains, that bevel on the wheel is basically when you hear the train start to cry out and sort of make that sound as it goes around the bend in the train tracks. And there's sort of that screeching sound as the train goes around the bend, and it goes as it goes around. That's actually one of the main inventions in why a train truly does work, is because those wheels are able to, with that bevel, slide from side to side as they go around the turn. And as that bevel slides from side to side, that is truly the genius of how and why the train works. And in a lot of ways, it's why that in really almost 200 years, the train, a lot of us lose sight of the fact that diesel engines have replaced steam engines, and all different types of improvements have been made to the railroad in all kinds of ways. This is a very modern locomotive we're drawing here, but the beveled wheel has stood the test of time, and it's made it so that so much freight, the physics behind that wheel being able to slide from side to side, has made it so that so much freight can be transported so efficiently. And trains in general are so efficient. They're able to haul heavy loads efficiently. And as you sit and draw them, as I'm working on the underframe now, as you sit and draw trains, you truly start to get the feeling that you're working on part of something so much bigger. You're working on something that's 200 years old. Like when you study history, you study the Declaration of Independence, and it wasn't long after that that trains really started to get invented in a relative sense. And that being said, a lot of us study the names of the presidents, and if you know names such as Baltimore in Ohio and Chesapeake in Ohio, knowing that is a huge part of America, such as knowing the names George Washington and Thomas Jefferson in a lot of ways. And because railroads such as Baltimore in Ohio and Chesapeake in Ohio, Union Pacific, a lot of those railroads, Abraham Lincoln helped the Union Pacific, for instance, build the first transcontinental railroad.